Welcome to another episode of Sound Advice Entrepreneurs Unfiltered. In 2014, Lucy Greenwood and her partner, Chris Rennick, quit their 9-to-5 jobs and left Barnsley to travel the world. They bought a camper van, which they named Yak, and started selling vintage clothes on Depop to make a living. They realised they had an eye for fashion, so they started their own business, Lucy and Yak. Today it's one of the UK's best-loved ethical clothing brands with 3 stores across the UK. Lucy is here to tell us the unfiltered story of what it really takes to build an ethical brand with transparency and community at its core. Welcome, Lucy.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's nice to meet you as well, Kate.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you for joining us. Lucy, I know that you've described Lucy and Yak as an accidental business. So just talk us through the light bulb moment for you.
Yeah, so I always say, everyone always says to me, it wasn't accidental, there must have been something there. But I think when I say accidental, it's like we didn't sort of go, here's a business plan, this is what we're going to do, let's go and try and get some funding and let's start this business. It kind of just all happened really organically over the space of a few years. So like you said, we started the business when we first went travelling, but we didn't actually start Lucy and Yak. So we started doing our own thing in 2014, but we didn't actually start Lucy and Yak until 2017. So yeah, it was funny because we went to New Zealand first. We quit our jobs. We hadn't saved a lot of money because we were kind of thinking we have to save money to go travelling, and that just was never going to happen because me and Chris had such party lifestyles. We just couldn't save any money at the time. So we decided, you know what, let's just quit our jobs. We'll figure out a way of making money on the road. So we went to New Zealand and we ended up making these little pouches to sell to like other travellers, and we were making them from sort of old clothing that travellers leave behind in hostels. There's usually like a box, full of just like shirts that are a bit, they're not the best shirts, but the prints on them are quite cool. And turning them into a little pouch was really great. And we started selling them to other travellers. We were hand stitching them on the beach and it was paradise. We weren't earning a lot of money, but I think that was another really big thing for us, that we kind of learned how to live off very little. So money started becoming less and less important for us. And it's funny because prior to that, me and Chris were both in sales where everything was commission, getting that sale, and it felt like a really money-driven world. And so when we got used to living off very little, we were like, this is amazing. And also that feeling of someone wanting to buy something that you've created, because we love sales and we love the buzz of selling something. But when you've actually created it, there was no better feeling than that. And when we did that, we sort of also, what was funny about back then when we were selling the pouches, we lived in New Zealand for about 6 months. And then when we left New Zealand, we were still getting messages off people who had bumped into each other and knew that they knew us because they had one of these pouches. So there was this community forming in New Zealand around these pouches, but when we weren't there, and that's kind of the same in Lucy and Yak, that's sort of like transferred over, this really strong community of people that sort of, when they see someone else in the street wearing Lucy and Yaks and they're also wearing them, or they're not wearing them but they know the brand and they own some, they give each other a little smile or a nod or say hi. And so it's really similar. So I feel like the story started there, but then we were traveling for a few years. We had to come back to the UK to Chris's stepdad was ill at the time, so we had to come back to help his mum. But we had no money when we came back, and we were like, we do not want to get a job. Like that's the last thing we want to do. We do not want to work for someone else. So we ended up buying and selling vintage clothing. So we bought an old van, which was Yak, lived in that, and we were basically traveling around the UK, going in charity shops, finding some gems, selling them on Depop. And every time we got a pair of dungarees, we might have paid a fiver for it and we sold it for like 60, 70 quid, and we just couldn't get enough dungarees. And it's still the case now because we've got a collaboration with Beyond Retro, the vintage shop, and they take some of our old Yaks back in exchange for vouchers, and because they can't get enough dungarees still 6 years on. So it shows that we kind of hit something at the right time. So it's funny because it was accidental in that we weren't trying to start a business as such, but all these events sort of just led to, we just knew we didn't want to work for anybody else after we did that in New Zealand.
Don't you feel that you've become almost unemployable once you started your own business? You can't go back to the 9-to-5.
No, definitely not. It's like you just couldn't imagine sort of, I suppose, someone telling you when and where to be. I think that's the big thing.
Once you'd realised you'd hit on something with the dungarees, you know, they were selling so fast and so profitably, what were the next steps you then took to build a business out of that?
So, well, when we started the dungarees, so after we'd been living in the van, we went to India, and that's when we met this tailor, and we made like the first 30 pairs of dungarees, put them on Depop while we were still in India, and they flew out 30 pairs in a minute or something. So we phoned him, we were like, we need to make some more, and we've just kind of grown the business off the back of just keep reinvesting the money that we took. So we never borrowed a penny. We never got any investment. We just, the few £100 we went traveling with was all we ever had. And yeah, I think what happened then though was me and Chris are really, what we've learned over the years is we're a really good team in that I'm quite good at sort of just getting stuff done. And I love I love figuring out how to sell something. And he is very, very good at the sort of business side of things because he had been a manager before, but I'd never been a manager before. So jumping up from a sales executive as the highest position I've ever had to being like the owner of a company was a big overnight jump. And then the imposter syndrome was unreal. But yeah, we just kept basically taking that money and putting it on more stock, and we just kept growing it like that. And then we moved into a warehouse, which was terrifying because that was our first commitment to sort of a big outgoing each month. From my experience, when I've met people who run a fashion brand or start a fashion brand, they often are fashion designers by trade. Like that's their previous, what they've done in their career. And I don't know, there's just something, when we've approached it, we've always looked at like, we're very customer driven because that's the background we were from. I've worked in bars, like I say, in sales. It's always like, what does the customer want? Not what do I like or what do I want to wear? What does the customer want? What's the customer telling us they want? And so we've always been really customer obsessed in that way, which really serves us well.
I want to come back to this tailor that you worked with in India. You said the business really started to grow. As you were scaling up, how did you ensure quality and transparency in that process?
So this was, I remember pulling like our hair out many times in the first few years because instead of going to like an already established factory, because we went traveling to India, like we went traveling for 6 months again. And initially it was like, oh, we're going traveling. But if we find someone who can make some dungarees, we might give it a go because we'd been selling vintage and we were like, do you know what? Let's just give it a go. So we'd been in India like a week and I bumped into somebody who I'd met in New Zealand years before walking down the street, and they just had some stuff made in this village in India and they were showing me, and I was like, this is so weird. We're here for 6 months and the first week I bump into somebody I've not seen for 3 years and they've just had some clothing made. So we went to this town. It is, and everything's kind of happened like that. I don't know. I never know, right, if it's just how we like look at stuff when it happens. Because sometimes I think it's that, I don't know, I feel like opportunities are there and sometimes we just miss them because we're fixated on something else. And anyway, that happened. And then, so we went to this town called Pushkar in Rajasthan, which is where they'd had this clothing made. And it's basically just a street full of people who have got shops, and there's a tailor in the shop making stuff and altering stuff. And, the idea is that it's a really ethical place because you're meeting the person that's making it. But when we had a few samples made in different shops, but then when we actually came to buy the bulk and say like, oh, we want to order 30 or 40, they explained to us that it would go out to this bigger factory on the outskirts of the town, but they didn't want to take us to this factory because I think they were worried we would like cut them out, which is fair enough. But there was just something in us that was like, we want to meet the people that are making this. We don't want to not know who they are and if they're treated well and if they're paid fairly. So we kind of just gave up because no one would take us to this factory. And then we were at the hotel we'd been staying in, the guest house. The cook in the hotel was asking us, what have you been doing here? And we explained, and he said, oh, my brother's a tailor and he can't afford a shop on this high street. Why don't you come and meet him? We're 10 kilometres outside of this town. We'll drive you out. So we went out to meet him, and that's when we met Ishmael, who turned out he'd got like 2 tailors working with him, and he was making bits and pieces of clothing for the market that we'd been sort of at shopping and making samples. and wasn't getting paid very much at all, because these markets are mostly like it's clothing for travellers who are on a budget, and you might pay £1 for a pair of leggings off this market. So you can imagine how much the tailor and how much Chanel was earning. It was nothing. So we got him to make a sample, and everything was great. He made the sample, needed some tweaks, but then it was incredible because he was so good in that he didn't try and... The trust was just there instantly, because he didn't try and sort of... The experience we'd had prior to that had been, if we said, oh, this is not right, they'd say, yes, it is. It's fine. It's fine. Whereas he was like, no, I'll take it away. I'll fix it. And then the same vice versa, because we, instead of negotiating him down, we negotiated him up. And he was like, are you guys crazy? Do you know how to negotiate? But do you know what? He told us how his pay structure worked, and that he basically gave 50% of the money to the tailor, and the other 50% he used for his overheads, and then whatever was left was his profit, I suppose. And so because he told us that, when he gave us the price, we were like, well, do you know what? We actually think the fair price is this, because we believe we can sell them for this. And so we negotiated upwards, which he thought was crazy. So instantly that trust was there, which was amazing. So that was great, because I think that was a really good way of setting up a relationship, because it meant that we had like trust, and we had some sort of say over like the ethics and the practices of the business, because it's a tiny business and it grew with us. The problem with that though is the quality was not up to scratch as we started growing. It was fine while we were small and our customers knew us really well, but then as we started growing, we were getting like, if we'd ordered 100 or something, 200 or something, it was sometimes it was coming, it was just tearing. And the amount of times we must have spent like 6 months of the first year and the second year in India trying to help him set up this factory and get it up to scratch. And he was growing with us. So it was like kind of like these two startups growing side by side, which was just chaos. It was absolute chaos. And it took us a really long time to get him up to scratch.
At what point did you feel that you had got him up to scratch and you could take a step back, not spend all your time in India overseeing that process?
I would say that time never actually came, and then COVID hit. So, but what we were lucky with was just before COVID hit, the last trip we had out there, we had met this woman called Sonia, who was incredible. She worked for another supplier that we worked with, because Ishmael was a woven factory. And so we needed a jersey factory when we went into selling fleeces and stuff. So we found this other like sustainable factory that we could make recycled fleeces with. And Sonia worked for them, but then she ended up getting made redundant. And she was so good at managing our account, we were like, should we give Sonia a job? And then we've got someone on the ground in India. And this happened about 3 months before COVID, which was like, oh my God, how lucky were we? Because she was on the ground then. She was going back and forth to Ishmael's factory, spending time with him, helping him get up to scratch. And she'd actually got more experience working in the factory side of things than we had. So she was able to really help him. She then started to build a team. So we've now got a team in New Delhi that basically help us to sort of keep the factories, like support the factories, but also someone on the ground making sure like the ethics are being maintained as well. Because during COVID, it was like we relied so heavily on being there and supporting them. And, whenever we saw we could physically see a problem in the factory. But when COVID hit, it was like, whoa, we can't be there. We just have to trust now. And so it was really great that we had Sonia on the ground.
And I mean, you talk a lot about sustainability and ethical practices. Obviously, the fashion industry is responsible for about 10% of the world's carbon emissions. So what are you doing to try and tackle overproduction and waste?
So this is a massive thing for us. And I think since the first year, we had an idea of buying clothing back, but we just couldn't figure out how to actually do it, because it's quite complicated to do it online. And we just didn't have the infrastructure or the team or anything like that. So, because I've always believed that, like, when you're producing anything new, whether it's organic or whether it's, the most sustainable fabric you can think of, it's still not as sustainable as something that already exists. And there's definitely enough clothing in the world that we could probably all manage without making any more clothing for years and years. But I think one of the things that makes me feel a little bit better is that we've always approached Lucy and Yak like, people are not going to just stop buying, and there is so many brands out there that are really, really terrible. we just want to offer something that's just that bit better. And I think, but then on the flip of that, we've sort of launched a buyback scheme finally, and we've launched it in our stores to begin with because we just want to see we just want to basically feel it out and find out, what the teething problems are before we launch it online, because we really would love to launch it online. Because I think, and it's not just about, the thing is, I think with circularity is businesses have to make it profitable, otherwise they'll not stop producing new. So we're trying to figure out a way of actually making secondhand profitable to us as a business so that we can actually produce less. So the idea is, once we've trialed it, we might increase so we basically, at the minute, we give up to a £20 voucher for you returning your old yaks back in any condition. So they can be completely unwearable and we'll recycle them. Or if they're in a good condition, we'll put them back up for sale in the shop. And what we're hoping is the percentage that we get back that's good enough to sell on will pay for the ones that we have to recycle and pay for the process. And if that ends up being even higher, we might increase the price that we'll pay for them and encourage even more people to bring them back and sort of really get serious about, actually, we really want to buy these back because we can actually make money out of them. And so that's really what we're hoping, because I think if businesses can make it profitable, and imagine if you could make it so that your business was 50% secondhand, 50% new, or even less new, and still have the same business, I think that would be a much better way to go.
Definitely. So you're trialing it at the moment, just trying to work out the right business model for that. It's interesting that you're doing the buyback scheme in your stores, which I wanted to talk to you about. I know you opened your first store in 2019. You now have stores in Brighton, Bristol and Norwich. So how important are bricks and mortar to the brand?
So in terms of, we've never really viewed them as necessarily a sales channel, even though they do really well, but we've kind of always said, let's approach retail like we just want these community hubs. So we're not going to overexpose ourselves and rent these massive stores that we're not going to be able to afford for whatever reason. If we've kind of trying to open lots of them but small in size, that's manageable financially, if we were to enter another lockdown or something like that. And I think for us, it's all about community, having those spaces that we can bring customers in. We can do, we're going to be doing a lot of workshops and events that are all around sustainability and upcycling and things like that. And then also the big thing was, we knew it was going to allow us to launch this buyback scheme, because it's really easy in store for them to get it, retag it, stick it straight on a rail and sell it. Whereas photographing, from my vintage days, photographing one piece and then selling it, you're just not going to make any, you just don't really make any money from that, because the cost involved in actually photographing it well, and there's only one of it, it's really hard. So what we feel like is if we change this to online as well, if we start accepting people's clothing back online, we won't sell them online. We'll probably end up with, we want to call them Lucy and Yak vintage stores. So they might just have secondhand yaks in them if we open it up to online, because we'll end up with quite a lot of them. So that's the kind of goal. We really want everybody in the UK to live kind of within 1 hour of a shop. So we don't want too many, probably 10 to 15 over the next few years. But yeah, if everyone's within an hour of one, then we should be good. Or everybody who, I suppose, in the most populated areas anyway, I think. And then we'd love to do a big yak van that travels around the smaller areas from time to time, upcycling things for people and things like that. But yeah, that's where we're at with retail.
I'd love to talk to you about growing that community of yakkers. What are some of the tactics that you've used to really create a loyal customer base?
Do you know what? I think it's funny, because when we talk about marketing, we've never really tried to market. From the early days, I've done a lot of videos on social media and things like that, and I think that's been a massive thing. That I think when people can see real people behind the brand, and they sort of, I think that really, because people buy from people, I think that was a massive thing for us. And I think customers really feeling like they're part of that, because we're sharing the journey with them and we're being really transparent. When things go wrong, I'll jump on, I'll do a video and apologise, or explain what's happened. If I'm not apologising because we didn't really do anything wrong, but we just want to say look, this is what's happened. And most of the time, I think what is amazing about it is customers, mostly when they get frustrated at businesses, it's just because they don't understand. So they might assume it's one thing, but then as soon as you get on and explain, they're like, oh, right, yeah, that makes sense. They weren't just trying to be, you know, assholes or whatever. They'd go, oh, you're human and you just made a mistake. And you're like, yes. So I think that's a big part of it. But also, there's just something in the brand. And honestly, still, I sometimes don't know how to like bottle the magic, you know. It's that this community on Facebook that actually started on its own organically, and then we ended up taking it in-house, and it's just incredible. And everyone's so kind to each other. And I think there's something about like Lucy customers, they're just really, really nice people, just so kind, so uplifting to each other. And the brand's really attracted them. So, and I honestly don't know if that's because we are really transparent and we're really open, and so they feel like they can be, or I really don't know. Sometimes it's hard to sort of bottle what that magic is, but this community is incredible because someone will, you know, post a photo and they say, oh, I don't think I look very good in this. And everyone just jumps on me like, you look amazing, you look incredible. Like, you know, they all the customers, they say that like they've never found a brand that they feel that they felt was them and sort of expressed who they were until they found Lucy. And it spans so many age demographics as well. It's like, you know, you've got like 16-year-old girls sharing dungarees with their mum. And like, I would have never done that. No way would I have shared any of my mum's clothes. They must have cool mums, I think that's what it is. But
super cool mums wearing dungarees. And it's interesting that you coming from a sales background, it sounds like you actually get the biggest kick out of that community rather than making a sale.
Yeah, it is. It just makes you feel so good. And I think that was one of the things that when the business was starting, we were really focused on obviously the ethics and the sustainability side of things. And we didn't really think about what it would mean to customers and what customers, we were customer focused in like give them a good service and make sure we listen to them. But we didn't really think about what it would mean to them. Do you know what I mean? We never really thought we would create a brand that means so much to people. And it's funny because it has its pros and cons, right? When we mess up, boy, do we get the stick for it. Like, and I think, but that's because people are so passionate about it and they shout about us so much and they tell everybody they know about it. When we do something wrong, they feel like that reflects on them or that's, you know, that's let them down. And so they're very vocal about it. And in a way that's kind of good because it keeps us like growing and changing and listening and, you know, trying to be what our customers want us to be. Without diluting the brand, obviously, that is a challenge because sometimes people want you to be a bit of everything and you can't because there's contradictions there.
Yeah, they're holding you to account.
Yeah, and sometimes there's like a group of people that say you need to do this thing, there's a group of people that say that you need to do this thing and they're totally different, they're total opposites and you're like, what do I do here? But it is really nice. Like when we get reviews, the customer service team, they share all of the review, like any nice feedback they get from customers, they share it in this Google chat group that we've all got, and it's so nice. They're amazing, and our customers stick up for us, you know, if they know the answer to something because they've watched one of my videos or they've read something and then someone new comes on social media having a go at us for something, I see them coming on and being like, actually no, it's this, and I'm like, so if you educate your customers, they'll actually fight your battles for you, and it's amazing because they understand it. And I think that's a big thing. I think educating customers on how businesses run internally and why you make the decisions you make and not treating them like idiots, right? Like not just treating them like you can market to them in like sneaky ways. It's like, just be honest with them. And it seems that's the best marketing tactic we've ever had. It's just being honest and upfront.
In terms of being so honest and transparent with your customers, doing the videos and really putting your face to the brand, has that been quite tricky for you as someone who has suffered with imposter syndrome?
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, have you had to find a new kind of source of confidence for this?
Yeah, absolutely. I have. It's funny you've caught me like at a time in my life and in my point with Lucy and Yak where I've just learned so much the last few years that I've realised that I was holding myself back in so many ways by not believing in myself. And I think this is a massive thing when you're from a working class background. It's you don't feel, and I never really realised it consciously, but you don't feel like you never got told at school to dream big or that you could do something like this. So you never expected it to happen to you. And so when you're in that position, you're like, I'm not good enough for this. And it's really hard because what I would say, and this is both me and Chris, we've both been quite similar in that, where we kind of in the early days, we listened too much sometimes to sort of different people in industry, or, you know, consultants, or some members of the team. And it really sent us off on a tangent that we were like, whoa, is this business even ours anymore? Is this what? And that happened for a couple of years during like there was all the COVID stuff in, and we were in lockdown, and it just didn't feel like the businesses were getting stick all left, right and centre on social media. And it felt like it was hard when your face is on it not to take it personally. But what I will say is all the low times I've had through that stuff has honestly just made me come out of the other side like incredibly stronger, and just sort of more sure of who I am and what my values are, and knowing that actually don't ever bend on your values for anything, no matter how scared you are, no matter, you know, how much you think it'll make you look a certain way, because it honestly just makes you fall out of love with your business. And then we got to a point where we were like, we can't run this business anymore. It doesn't feel like our business. And so it was either do something about it and stand up for what you believe in, and stop running it in the way that you are, or sell it. And we were like, well, we don't want to sell it. Like, we need to turn this around so that we love it again. And we have. And Chris has been much better at that than I am. He's definitely carried me through it. But yeah, it's tough.
Did you turn to anyone for advice other than Chris during those tough moments? Like, how did you sort of pull yourself up and really think I'm good enough?
Do you know what? I owe a lot to a woman called Africa Brooke. Do you know Africa Brooke?
No.
She's got quite a big following on social media, but she basically she's a consultant who works with entrepreneurs and sort of people in the public eye who are struggling to stand by their values and sort of feeling terrified of being themselves in a public space because of everything that's been going on in the world the last few years. And so I reached out to her because I'd been following her for a while, and she talks about all this stuff a lot. And I ended up having sort of like 10 one-hour sessions with her over a period, and she was absolutely amazing because she just helped me to realise that actually the stuff that I valued and what I did care about, they were all like okay. Like there was, I didn't, you know, it did it because in my head I was doing crazy sums like this equals this, and I don't want anyone to think that. And she was like, no, you're looking at it all wrong. And she's been really amazing through it. But also actually friends, I've got, you know, some great friends that have carried me through it as well. And a lot of the team actually have been amazing as well. So yeah, lots of people.
And I know that Lucy and Yak is now one of the fastest growing companies in the UK. What would you say are some of the big challenges or mistakes you've made as you've scaled the brand?
So, well, that was certainly one of them, sort of trusting your own gut. Like, I have not known a time when your own gut is not right. It always is. It's like, even if it's just a little niggle, but you have to be so in tune with what's going on that you actually can read it. And that's where I was struggling. But so that's a massive one for me. You know, it doesn't matter how experienced someone is and how much more experience they might have than you. They're not necessarily right. They like listen to people and sort of figure out your own way with it, but don't just take someone's word as gospel because they're speaking confidently. Because they've been big mistakes that I've made, and that's at every level. That could be someone junior or someone really senior. You know, like it really doesn't matter. I mean, fashion's a tough one in general with supply chains. They've been some of my most challenging moments. You know, figuring out how to fix all of the problems when it comes to supply chains with COVID and things like that. They've been an absolute nightmare. But I think it's accepting that they always exist. They don't ever end in fashion. They get easier as you've been going for longer, but they never end.
Have you looked at moving your suppliers closer to home?
We have, yeah. We did experiment with it a few years back. But to be honest, the UK is challenging because the UK used to be a massive manufacturing place, but because it's not anymore, you might have a factory, but they don't have the infrastructure around them. So there's so many moving parts to making a garment. And when we experimented with it, we were like, okay, so we make it closer to home. That's not actually any more sustainable. I mean, obviously it's good for the economy and it feeds into giving people jobs, but it's not any more sustainable because we can't grow cotton here. So we still have to import the cotton. And that's, if you import in the whole roll of cotton, you actually import in the waste as well, which is actually more than just importing a garment. But so in terms of the sustainability and the miles it has to do, it still has to come from a country that grows cotton, regardless if you're using material like natural materials. I think we make a little bit of linen in Ireland, but it's really small scale. So, and to be honest, right, when we got so many questions from our customers that were like, well, what about your workers in India? Are you taking work away from them? And I don't think there was as much desire for it as we'd initially thought. And then it's very, very expensive. We pay a living wage. So we pay a living wage as per the livingwage.org, not the government's new labelling of the minimum wage. And it's quite, and we also do a 4-day working week. So, and we still pay, basically when we reduced down to a 4-day working week, we kept everyone's salaries as though they were working 5 days still. So that means like the hourly rate of our warehouse staff is like, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's about 13 quid an hour or something. And so that would have been the same in the factories. And then it was like, we just can't make this work. People weren't willing to really pay that extra.
What was behind the decision to move the entire workforce to a 4-day working week, and what impact has that had on productivity?
So it happened during COVID, actually. Everyone stayed at home. So we shut the warehouse, even though they didn't ask us to shut the warehouse, but we were like, I don't know what's going on here. The government's really confusing us. Is it essential? Is it not essential? Well, it's not essential, but it's a warehouse and they're not mentioning warehouse. But anyway, we shut our warehouse for a period of time. And then when we brought people back in, we brought them in on less hours so that we could spread and not have as many people in the warehouse at once. So we split the days. And we noticed that productivity didn't really drop. And so we were like, well, this is interesting. So we kind of put it to the staff. We were like, look, we're going to trial this for 12 months. Productivity has to remain really good. It doesn't, we expect it to drop a little bit, right? Because it's a full day you're losing, but it really hasn't. It's become, I feel like, that last hour of the day, last hour before I think everybody just stops working anyway. Everyone takes a little bit longer on their break. Because we're not what a company that like clock in, clock out, check your breaks and stuff. Everyone would take a bit longer getting back from their break and go on their break a couple of minutes early, have more toilet breaks, just sauntering around. And I feel like, because we said to them, like, look, we're only going to be able to make this work if we still have the output that we need, because we're already paying a living wage and this is going to increase it even more. And honestly, it's been incredible. And then obviously in the offices as well, it's amazing. Obviously there's weeks when they have to do a little bit more, but that's kind of like when you think about fashion offices and stuff, they normally do 5 days and have to do a little bit more. So it's kind of like sometimes, certain times of the year, they might have to do a little bit more, but it's rare. And most people get their 3-day weekends and people love it. I think certainly one of the team said, I just don't feel like I need a holiday when I'm trying to book my holidays. I'm like, well, I've got long weekends every weekend, so I don't really feel like I need to use that many holidays.
Do you think your staff are happier?
Definitely. Yeah. And do you know what? I think it came from when me and Chris worked in sales, we worked 6 days one week, like 12-hour shifts, and 5 days the following week. And we never got 2 days off together. And you just can't recover. It's just not enough time to recover. I feel like that Friday is a great day for everyone to do their chores, do all the rubbish stuff that you don't really like doing. You don't want to waste
life admin.
Yeah, but you need to do it, but you don't want to use your Saturday and Sunday, and then you've got your Saturday and Sunday, and you feel like coming back to work on Monday, you've sorted all your life admin now, because there's nothing worse than stuff like that hanging over your head. Oh, I need to go to the dentist, or I need to go to the doctors, but I haven't got time. And it's like, when that stuff's hanging over your head, it probably affects your work as well.
So what's next for Lucy and Yak? Tell us about new products you're launching into or markets.
So this map behind is I'm actually in Chris's office, and Chris is in charge of our retail side of the business. And we're growing in the USA. The USA is slowly becoming quite a big percentage of our customers, specifically sort of California, New York. So we are looking at how we can grow more in the US. So me and Chris are actually doing a bit of a trip to California in a couple of days, but I don't know when this podcast is coming out, so we might have already been. But And we want to sort of scope out maybe opening a couple of shops, maybe testing some pop-ups first, just sort of seeing how that goes. Because I just feel like online advertising is just getting tougher and tougher. And it feels like more robust to have some physical presence in a country that you've actually got a big customer base in. And I think it builds trust as well. You know, if you come across the brand in the USA, you don't know if it's like legit or if it's one of these brands that, you know, there's a lot of these brands that have popped up that just kind of copy everybody and they're really cheap and it's not great quality when it comes. So I think finding, like, sort of having like a base at least in a country puts trust in them. Like, oh yeah, they've got a shop and it's in my country. So I think that's a big thing for us, and that's really exciting because it allows me and Chris to almost go back to the start of the business where when we first started, we were trying to figure out how to sell stuff and what people want. And it's like it feels kind of brand new. Even though we've got customers in the US, it feels like this whole new thing for us to sort of figure out. And that's the bit that we love. And I suppose most entrepreneurs will tell you that. That's the fun bit.
Yeah. You miss that kind of gritty, tough startup stage.
Yeah, like really hands-on. And now it just, as time goes on, you feel like I'm just in meetings. You're not as hands-on. And don't get me wrong, there's parts of that I love. But I do miss the sort of like scrapping around and trying to figure stuff out. And then in terms of new products, we are expanding our range quite a lot. You know, we obviously started as dungarees. We know that dungarees are not for everybody, and we want to own dungarees, and we will always own dungarees, I think. But we've already expanded into other areas, but we want to keep just expanding that. So knitwear is actually a big category that we're going to grow into at the back end of this year, and we've got some amazing new knitwear coming. So and also I feel like prints are as much our thing as dungarees, so we really want to expand on that and keep just sort of adding amazing prints to everything that we do. And also obviously our buyback scheme is something that we really want to focus in on, that circularity. We've got an in-house upcycler now as well who works for us full time, so there's loads we're doing around that. I mean, we want to sort of like convert a camper van into like a sort of mobile react station that can drive around different towns and fix people's dungarees and stuff. So we've got a lot of exciting ideas.
It's a great idea. And if you had to sum up your vision for the company in one sentence, what would it be?
I think to just continue bringing joy to people's lives, you know, that whether that's people internally, whether that's people in the factories, whether that's people, our customers, I think just trying to do business in a good way and continuing that.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Lucy. I've really loved hearing your story.
Thank you.
You can find out more about the company and check out the full range of organic dungarees at lucyandyak.com. and join the comfort movement on Instagram at lucyandyak. Hope everyone has enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to rate and review us and go to sage.com/podcast for more unfiltered stories.